So we've got a 10K virtual race coming up at the weekend. Liz, how are you feeling?
Well, I'm having kind of a mixture of feelings. So I'm kind of excited because I want to see what I can do, but I know it's going to hurt so much. I have this love-hate relationship with that process. I mean, when I was a kid, I really used to like dread races for that because I used to know that they were going to be painful. And even later on, like when I would run cross country with the university, we had so many races, we would end up having like a race every week or every 2 weeks. And by the end, it was almost like I was already panicking on the starting line because I just knew how much it was going to hurt. Now that I like to think that I'm wiser
And older.
and older, yep, they it goes together. So I mean, there's always a positive
That
side
must
to
be
getting
really
older.
wise then.
Yes, you are. You are. I can see it in your running. But yeah, I feel like I sort of know that, intellectually that it has to hurt in order to perform. So I try and like not dread it so much. And today's book, the author Alexi Pappas also kind of had the same issue with racing pain. So she learned that basically you have to be brave.
And I guess that's why the book's called Bravey.
Hi, and welcome to the Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review running books to help you decide if you'd like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running will help keep you motivated and keep you excited about your own running and inspired to try something new. My name is Liz, and with my co-host Alan, we're going to talk about Alexi Pappas' new book, Bravey. So the book is a memoir about how Alexi felt about and dealt with the loss of her mother, and how this left her with the desire to matter. It's not so much chronological, but is organized in chapters around specific themes and subjects. Each chapter opens with a poem or a saying.
So let's tell you all a bit about Alexi before we get started discussing her book. Alexi was an NCAA All-American athlete for both Dartmouth College and the University of Oregon, which we hear about during the book. And she's an Olympian, having represented Greece, one of her countries of origin, in the 10,000 meters in 2016 Olympics. And during that period, she actually broke during that event, she actually broke the 10,000 meter national record for Greece. Even at her young age, she's also an actor and creator of 2 movies, Track Town and Olympic Dreams. Her husband is Jeremy Teacher, who is actually the film director for those movies. So she's married to a film director. She also recently opened up about her experience with severe clinical depression, which she suffered after the Olympics. And there's a good article in the New York Times where she's discussing that.
So unfortunately, we couldn't get Alexi to come and speak with us because she's very busy
She's making her
producing
3rd
another
movie. Yeah, so I hear.
Yeah, so it's really exciting for
So
her.
we have to do all the work and discuss the book.
Exactly.
Normally we just ask the questions.
Yeah. This book, I mean, there was really a lot in it, so we're not gonna tell you every little detail about the book because it's really packed, but it sort of has like 3 themes, I guess. It's her family, her growing up, then her athletics, her sports. The last part was about her dealings with mental health.
Yeah, we can jump into different pieces of that. The title Bravey, I guess you look at it and you go, okay, I know what Bravey means. It means kind of be brave, but it's a bit sort of whimsical and childish, and it comes from childlike, not childish. It's kind of a childish is sort of a negative word. Childlike is sort of an endearing word. And it comes from like poems and mantras that Alexi used to write for herself. And she has one at the start which goes, run like a bravey, sleep like a baby, dream like a crazy, replace can't with maybe. So that's the kind of mantra poem that she almost bases her sort of whole career and her whole lifestyle almost a little bit around a can-do mentality and an ability to overcome by being brave.
And I guess it comes from her upbringing. So that's probably, why her, her upbringing was such a big part of the book. Her mother died when she was young, and she actually didn't find out how she died until much later. But her mom basically committed suicide. Alexi grew up without a mom, and she kind of talks about that because she talks about, like, a lot in the first part, how she sort of missed having a mom, and she wondered what she was missing out on because she didn't have a mom, because she would see other girls like in the park with their moms, or that kind of thing. And so she would sort of, it was sort of her wondering about the whole female mentor, because she had a brother and a father. And her father was, he was very present, very encouraging, and he made sure that, that things were all taken care of, but he wasn't female. So
Yeah, I've actually got in my notes here, a good part of the book represents or presents to me like Alexi trying to fill a mum-shaped hole in her life because she never really had one and didn't know what it was to have one, really. The book pitches you in pretty hardcore, I think, where she talks about, memories of her mother. Her mother committed suicide when she was 5, and Alexi, kind of to begin with, sort of felt responsible. That she talks about, well, wasn't I good enough that my mom wanted to stay for me, and kind of takes on that and spends quite a bit of time thinking about that and rationalizing that away as she grows up, which is great guidance and advice for anybody who, feels like that, responsible for things that really they had no control over. But her mom obviously had some serious mental problems, not just, a bit of depression or something like that, but she talks about remembering her mom offering her a cigarette when she was 4 years old.
Yeah.
Talks about seeing her mom trying to saw her own arm off in some fit of delusion. So she's pretty candid about all those kind of things, and it's quite shocking to begin with.
And also her mom was not very present, like, when she was alive, because oftentimes she was institutionalized. So she would be away for long periods of time, and then she would come back. But Alexi didn't feel like when she saw other girls with their moms, like, she would say, oh, I would see them at the park, and they would, like, hang off of their moms and, like, be very close with them. And that wasn't kind of the relationship she had with her mom. The one other memory that she has of her mom is of her riding her bike and her mom just kind of watching her from a distance.
Yeah, she talks about experiencing mums by being in the Girl Scouts and looking at everybody else's mums.
Yeah. And it's funny because she has this, like, little bit of and I related to the Girl Scouts chapter a lot, because I kind of felt the same way, because I have a mom. I grew up with a mom, but my mom wasn't like, she wasn't like a cuddly mom. I didn't get hugs every day. She just kind of, like, she provided food, but, like, that was it. And so when I went to Girl Scouts, and you have, like, people kind of hovering over you, and that's sort of how she felt. She felt like people were hovering, but the thing is that they would, like, always correct her, and so she felt sort of awkward, because usually the way that she would learn things is that she would do them wrong, and then she would try again, and it was all in the privacy of, like, her own company. Like, she wasn't always being watched by her dad, because her dad was raising 2 kids and he had a job full time. So she was very much, like, left to her own devices. So then when she went to these Girl Scout meetings, she was sort of, like, wanted that attention, but at the same time, like, then not that kind of attention. Like, she wanted to be able to fail. That's not what she wanted all those Girl Scout moms to do. So it was kind of
funny. She actually says in the book she simultaneously craved and resented mums.
Yeah. And and I remember feeling that too, because, like, I was kind of an only child until, like, I was 8 and my sister was born, and I do a lot of things by myself. And yeah, sometimes maybe I was left a little too much to my own devices. I'll tell you a story. I actually cut all the buttons off my dad's shirts in his closet, because because I had a button collection. I had decided I had found all the buttons from all my mom's sewing things. I'd collected them all. And then like I had to find another place to collect more buttons, and the closet was the only place I could find buttons. So yeah, anyway, that was an aside, but kind of funny. So I completely understood. I understood Alexi with the Girl Scouts chapter. Later on, though, her dad, he would hire like young women to live with them for a year at a time, and he called them au pairs. I'd never heard that term before, but I guess they
it's a
were
very
like
common term.
nannies.
It's a very common term in Europe. Everybody
Oh,
who's listening to this from Europe will know what an au pair is.
okay. I guess for the rest of us, they're like nannies, like
Little
temporary
bit, yeah.
nannies. Because they would come and live with them for a year at a time. And some of them she didn't like, and others she really, really liked. And there was one that kind of stood out to me. Her name was Petra from the Czech Republic, because she was kind of sporty and she played basketball, and she taught Alexi that it's good to look up to people, but not to become them. Like you still have to become your own person. I thought that was
Yeah, I mean,
that was like well said.
one of the things she does in the book, I guess being at the age she's at now and looking back on it, is she tries to extract the lessons and sort of share them. And if you're receptive to that, it's super in terms of, you see, okay, she's having a hard time. How's she dealing with it? Look at what she extracts from that. She extracts an ability to be independent and not have to go and look for help or whatever, which is kind of cool in the book in terms of the reading of the book. It's interesting. If you don't like that sort of thing, people trying to extract the lesson and share it with you, then you probably won't like the book. But I found it quite fun from that point of view. In terms of her relationship with her father, I think she sort of said her father was very, to use the French term, laissez-faire, would let her do things. And his sort of approach was sport was a way to teach her. He could pitch her into sport, and if he didn't have mothering type instincts, sport would teach her things.
Yeah, so she got to do a lot of sports.
Yeah, and her performance in sport, she says, was the way that to some extent she felt loved, which kind of made me feel a little bit sad, because then you feel it's conditional love. It's conditional upon you performing well. That didn't really come out in the book, but I was sort of looking at it and thinking, well, that makes it a bit conditional. But I think she grew to love sport because it had clear rules. People were taking care of her through that. It was controlled, and she was able to make her own way. She didn't have to wait for somebody else to permit her to do things. She could get in there and make it happen.
I think like, because I know what you're saying, because I sort of felt the same. It was almost like she felt sport was a way to excel, and that way she got like positive attention. But later in the book, it seems like no, like there were other little things. Like her dad was never one to impose any particular thing on her, but like if she was, so let's say he didn't impose any one sport on her, but he expected that if she was signed up to do a sport, that she was going to go. So it was almost like he was instilling kind of good habits and like follow through on what you're doing. I think like later on you sort of find out that it's not so much about like how she performed, although later she becomes an Olympian, so she's obviously finds her sport and is very good at it. But
I think one thing she did with the absence of some parental input was she looked around for mentors everywhere, which turned the thing into a positive. I think she says she learned that asking for help is a superpower. And how often do we see that people don't know how to do things, but they don't put their hand up, or they don't ask the question, or they don't ask for help? And she learned very quickly that that's not the way forward. The way forward is to ask all the time and integrate. And she would just meet different people with different skills and different abilities and ask them how to do it and learn from them.
Yeah, and she had really good role models. I wonder if it's just because she knew like which ones were good role models and which ones weren't, and she would gravitate towards them. But she said at one point that she because she was also very good at writing. She had a poetry teacher that she was very close to in university, and she had kind of like a crossroad, like two options, where at the end of that, she could either go to school further, or she could go to school at the University of Oregon and run track.
Yeah, she kind of chose between arts and literature to some extent, which she was very interested and good at.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, she's never really chosen. She's just excelled in both of them, we see.
Yeah, but her poetry teacher, she asked her poetry teacher what she should do, and her poetry teacher said, pursue your athletic passion now, because you have,
Yep.
you have your whole life to do poetry. And I found that was good, because sometimes, like, if you have a mentor that sees something in you, sometimes they don't always
They
push
don't think
you.
about you. They think about the skill that you have in the thing that they like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and it was kind of nice, because this poetry teacher pushed her she was kind of looking after the whole Alexi, not just the poetry student Alexi. So
Yeah, that was her poetry prof, Cynthia. So well done, Cynthia.
mhm,
You made an Olympian.
made an Olympian, exactly.
So she got good at running and went off to University of Oregon, and she talked about having her big idol in running, Dina Casta, who's one of the people that you talk about often, Liz,
Mhm.
and that she got to take a trip to Mammoth Lakes and do some training with Dina Castas, who she includes in her mentor list. And she has a wide variation of mentors, nearly all of whom are female.
Yeah, she talks about the female ones, but she also has some male mentors, like her coach Ian,
Ah,
who
yes.
yeah, who trained her for the before the Olympics. And actually, there was one thing that stuck out from the book. Coach Ian told her about the rule of thirds. So you should feel good 1/3 of the time, okay 1/3 of the time, and crappy 1/3 of the time. Because if the mix is different, if you feel crappy all of the time, you're training too hard and you're just going to be overtrained. But if you never feel that way, it means that you're not pushing your limits.
That's kind of cool. She has a rules type thing, doesn't she? She seems to like trying to distill things down into simple rule concepts.
I like rules.
The rule of always trying hard is another rule that she comes out with. Yeah, you like rules. Yeah, I
Like
mean, I
rules.
used to have a rule that I used to tell people about, like a rule of thirds. But I used to tell people about running marathons. Say, oh, I'm going to run a marathon. Can you give me any advice? I say, well, the rule of thirds applies to marathons. The first third you run according to your watch. Ignore your body, because it will tell you to go too fast. The second third you run according to your body, because it's now conditioned and it's going about the speed that you need to go. The third you have to run with your mind and ignore your body, because it will tell you to slow down.
That's good.
That's my rule of thirds for marathon running, which it was prompted by seeing Lexi's rule of thirds for training.
Mm-hmm.
She talked about another of her superpowers being going through puberty, because while she was doing that, she was not really into running.
Yeah, because she had a coach.
Didn't go through the red S and the starving yourself to get your weight down, and
Mm-hmm.
all of those things that we've talked about a lot on this podcast, because it's a recurring theme historically with female runners.
It is. But it sort of happened by accident, because her high school coach wanted her to choose between theater and running. So basically, in high school, he was giving her an ultimatum, because, he wanted his high school runners to just do nothing but run. And she was involved in all kinds of things. So she decided instead she was just going to ditch the running and do everything else. So she didn't run just because of that, and came back to it later. But the thing is, in the meantime, she went through puberty. So she says it was kind of a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, sort of lucky happenstance that she skipped all of that problem period. Took her a while to
Mm-hmm.
get then probably at the running level that she needed to be, but she was able to sustain that because she didn't have this crazy training through puberty phase.
Mm-hmm. When she went to the Olympics, she ended up competing for Greece, even though she's also a U.S. citizen. and she ended up running 31:36, which was her personal best and also the Greek national record for 10,000 meter. And she ran it when I read it in the book, she ran it at the same time as the girl that ended up running the world record. I remember watching that race. It's an Ethiopian woman. I can't remember her name, but she was just lapping. She lapped everybody. If you have a chance to go and watch the 10,000 meters in the 2016 Olympics, the girl just takes off by herself, and I think she ends up lapping even the second person. It's incredible. I remember watching that race. So Alexi was in that race, and she the world record holder ended up asking her before the race for a sip of her water because they had crossed the starting line, across the mat or something like that to go to the starting area, and they weren't allowed to go back anymore after that. So everybody, like, nobody thought to bring their water bottle, and
Except
Alexi
for
had hers in her
Alexi,
hand.
because she was super organized.
Well, no, it was kind of an accident.
The girl was Alma Zayana of Ethiopia.
Incredible.
She ran a world record.
Go watch that on YouTube, my advice.
I didn't see it in the book, but you know if Alexi was running for Greece because she couldn't qualify for the US, or did she choose preferentially to go for Greece?
I think she chose preferentially, but it doesn't really say. It's not really mentioned.
I didn't register it. I noted it's something I was going to ask Alexi.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we didn't get that chance today.
The highest finishing US athlete in that race was Molly Huddle, who ran in 30 minutes, 13 seconds, which was some 10, 11 places ahead of Alexi Pappas. And Emily Infield also finished ahead of Alexi. But the third US girl finished behind Alexi.
So I guess she would have had a chance to compete for either country.
I imagine so. Somebody can write in and tell us, or leave us a message on our Instagram or something. And
yeah, let us know. I guess after the Olympics, it kind of goes downhill a bit for her.
Yeah, just before we get to that, one of the things she does give is a good insight into the Olympic Village, how it's a like crazy party, manic, fun place to be, and romantic as well, and that it's hard to control. So you get a bit of insight what it would like to be in the, there's all these super athletes all pumped up, excited as hell, and all young, virile people. So you can imagine that they're all beautiful people, and it's probably very romantic as well as a bit crazy. You have to do your event near the end and you're stuck in the Olympic Village. It probably gets increasingly annoying as well.
And there's some kind of quirky things in there, like she ended up getting a makeover after she did her race in the Olympic Village, which is kind of sounds kind of fun and unexpected.
Yeah, you can tell that there's a mum-shaped hole in her life by the amount of numbers of words that she devotes into describing what it's like to get a makeover and have your hair brushed by a woman who teaches her how to brush her hair properly and explains about how having her hair done. And she goes on and on and on about this. Like most girls probably who've had a mum through all that period would just go, oh, I had a makeover, full stop, and just move on to the next story. But she kind of is drinking in every second of that experience because she's had so few of those.
Yeah, it's sort of like enlightening, and at the same time, it's later in her life, because I guess she's probably in her 20s at this point, but she still misses, the having a mom experience, even though at this point, like, she starts, I think she's already pretty much realizing that, her experience led her to where she was, and she's in a good place and everything, but you see that she still has that mum hole.
And after Rio, she's also finished her first movie, Tracktown.
Yep.
So she gets the sort of inevitable down after a big event. I always find after a big marathon or something, I always feel a little bit sort of a bit lost and a bit bluesy. So she has, after the Olympics, she has a huge downer, which is kind of standard, but she's also just finished a project from a filmmaking point of view. And then she just doesn't really pause to take stock and absorb the experience, and she's looking around for the next thing, and she goes into what looks like to be quite a serious depression, which she says she first noticed because she stopped sleeping. She just wasn't sleeping.
Yeah.
That's obviously a big warning sign, but she sort of just plowed on. And then she started screwing things up, it looks like. She was explaining it very gently, but it looked like she was, in a bad sort of state of mind, not very well stabilized through lack of sleep, and then started sort of screwing up on her contract interviews and things for...
Yeah, and she ended up moving, but she made a rush decision. Then she wanted to come back, and Nike sort of like didn't give her the contract that she walked away from initially. They gave her like a reduced contract, which she ended up signing. But then I think she like once she was back to herself, then she walked away from that. But yeah, it was sort of like she was running from one event to the other.
It sounds a little bit like, she's very much a doer, and she judges her self-worth through doing things. And she'd done really big things, and there weren't anything like that to do. And then she got into a syndrome, and then got very depressed, and then made things worse for herself. And I made her more depressed, and she just got into a vicious circle.
But luckily, she ended up finding help, and she ended up finding she ended up being well matched to the person she was working with, to her psychiatrist, Dr. I don't know if I'm going to say this right, but Dr. Arpaia. So he would give her things to do that would sort of reinforce something positive. And I just remember her talking about how he would give her homework, make her write the same phrase over and over and over.
Yeah, I think the big learning that she said was that to take one day at a time, and you couldn't think your way out of these kinds of situations. You have to act your way out. So you have to have an action. You have to change something in your action, which was a big learning. And I think that's quite insightful. You go, oh, woe is me, but that's not going to, even if you say, I know what's happening to me, and you internalize it, that's not going to change things. What's going to change things is what you do. So even a small action to begin with. I think that's good advice for everybody, but that was an insight that she got from her psychiatrist, Dr. Arpaia. But she started piecing things back together. She got Nike to tear up her crummy contract that she hastily tried to renegotiate with her. She went off and made a deal with Champion Sports and was able to get a different type of contract, and gradually sort of pieced her life together one step at a time. I think she was quite suicidal at one stage because her father was like super concerned about losing her after losing his wife, her mother.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that made her realize that she needs help and made her get help was that, she didn't want to hurt him.
Yeah, and she was haunted by the fact that has she sort of inherited some sort of trait from her mom? Was she doomed to reenact the behaviors of her mother?
Which actually later she says that she realized that it was because her mother didn't get the same help that she got. I guess the treatments were not, they were not what they are today. So she didn't get what she needed and eventually took her life. But Alexi had a different experience, and she learned a lot of things along the way. So one of the things that she learned was about willpower being a finite resource. I had heard this before because I think my coach John told us this during one of we would have these little team chats, and he would always say, well, you can only be good at three things. So you have to either, school or work, your family, and then you can choose one other thing. And if you choose for it to be running, then you can be very successful. And it's a little bit the same idea as what Alexi's talking about, willpower being a finite resource. And every decision that you make, is kind of draining your willpower. And so by the end of the day, you might not have enough willpower to push through a really hard workout because, you know, you spent your day at work deciding, you know, what you need to do first, prioritizing tasks, you know, deciding what you have to pack your kids for lunch, what you have to pack yourself for lunch. And so she talks about reducing the number of choices that you have to make. And I find that helpful because I kind of would do that, you know, before COVID, and you know, now everybody's working from home and I don't have to pack a lunch, but I used to pack a lunch because that would mean that I don't have to sort of think about what I'm going to eat for lunch and figure out where I have to go to get it and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, the whole idea of willpower as a resource is pretty, I don't know, I found that that's super helpful.
She was also a bit handicapped by the fact that no one ever talked about feelings in Alexi's family, I guess because her mother was kind of pushed off to one side when she was a child and they didn't talk about it. And then there was her father and her brother. So it was a masculine type of family with a masculine type approach where you didn't talk much about your feelings. And she's kind of had to learn that from her psychiatrist and coming out of depression. There's quite an interesting chapter about Jerry Seinfeld where she says she loves Jerry Seinfeld, not because he's funny, but because in Jerry Seinfeld's world, you talk about everything, even all the things that don't mean anything. They're inconsequential. You know, on Seinfeld, it's a show about nothing. And they talk about like really stupid stuff. But she actually says, you know, she went to see Jerry Seinfeld in concert and cried. You know, probably everybody else was laughing, but she was crying because it's the world, you know, it's almost the reverse world that she grew up in, where you talk about everything, which she saw as being extremely positive.
Yeah. There were also there was a chapter called Love, and it was about sort of when she met Jeremy in university, and before that, like she only just had, you know, physical relationship with boys. She didn't really, I guess it didn't seem like she dated really.
She didn't have an emotional relationship.
Exactly. Anyway, so with Jeremy, it was kind of different. And they both had big dreams. But then when she was experiencing her depression, Jeremy was also depressed at the same time. And usually that kind of thing is like the end of a relationship, but they worked through it. And I'm like, kudos to them. That's impressive. She said that what they had to learn was to give each other space and also to like let each other work out their problems with their therapists separately, but then they would be sort of together and they were there for each other, but for the problems they would work with somebody else.
Yeah, it's almost surprising that they managed to get through it and come out the other end together. It seemed like such a huge challenge for them.
And they ended up getting married.
Yeah, it's interesting that the film Tracktown that Alexi starred in, that they made and Jeremy directed. I watched it after I read the book. I don't know if you've seen it, but I watched it, and it actually draws on a lot of the themes, having read the book.
Oh, wow.
Look at Tracktown, you go, okay, there's that aspect. I mean, it's fictional, but there's a lot of, you know, Alexi's experiences in Bravey transformed.
Yeah, I felt sad for her when, you know, she released the first movie and she was so proud. And they read the first review in one
really
of those magazines, and it's really bad. But it's not really bad. It's not a bad review like, oh, the movie was terrible. No, it was a bad review as in they were commenting on like Alexi's appearance and that she was not like a voluptuous woman. But the thing is that she was playing the role of like an athlete, and she was an athlete.
Yeah, she had the body of an elite athlete, basically.
Exactly. But the chapter is called Flat Chest and Freakishly Gnarled Feet, because that's what the reviewer had said about her. And it was almost like the review was not even a review about the movie. It was like a review about what he thought she looked like compared to what he thought she should look like. And
I remember thinking, I wish I could get that reviewer and say, you've got it all wrong. It's the reverse.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
need to give Alexi credit. If she's got a flat chest and freakishly gnarly feet, that's correct. It's all the other people who are incorrect. Kind of a shame.
It was, but kudos to her for like getting over that and not, letting it get her too down, because, he obviously doesn't know what he's talking about.
From a runner's point of view, no.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, the movie is called Tracktown, so it's about running. So we know best. There's a chapter where she reflects on her dad and how she's sad for her dad. And I found it like kind of heartbreaking. It's almost like she sort of like realized, she's all grown up and everything, but she realized that all those years her dad was very calmly taking care of her and, trying to be the best he could and provide the best things he could. And he was all alone. And she felt so sad for him because he lost the woman that he loved because he couldn't prevent her from suicide.
And his only quest really with respect to her was to make sure she never ended up in the same situation.
Yeah.
She actually refers to a situation where he says, we can't lose this time, i.e. you can't commit suicide.
Yeah.
One is too many. Two is unthinkable.
Yeah. So that chapter was a little bit sad because you see how she realized how her dad all these years, I mean, he must be so sad. But I think like it sounds like her dad is, he's very, very proud of her and probably very happy with everything, the way it turned out, because, he has two good kids. Sort of, it's a bit of a sad chapter when she reflects on that. There's another chapter. I don't know if you wanted to move on, but I really liked the chapter about the head lice, because she talks about when she had lice as a kid, and
but she had them for like 2 years.
She had them for 2 years.
Didn't realize.
No, she didn't know what it was. She just, her head was itchy, and her dad kind of brushed it off, and he was like, I've got whatever other things to take care of. She ended up just, just kind of, she let it go, and she had an itchy scalp, but whatever. And then one day she saw a bug crawling on her. I don't remember if it was on her hair strand, on her shirt. She didn't really understand what was going on. Finally, they discovered that she had lice. So her dad tried to get her au pair to treat it. So they would do like these mayonnaise baths, and they would do the shampoo, but it was never really thorough enough. So like they always came back, and eventually she ends up.
So why did you like the chapter?
I liked it because the way that she finally got rid of it was that she got rid of it herself. She ended up sitting there for I don't know how long. She picked them all out herself. She washed her hair. Then she did a mayonnaise coat, and she like made sure that she coated every single strand of her hair. And finally, in the end, like that was it. She got rid of them. And she was so proud because she said like it made her feel capable, made her feel like she could do anything. Like she's, the master of her destiny. And I was like, wow.
Takes control and makes it happen.
Exactly.
And you see little things like that are a small example of what, she's doing with big things like going to the Olympics or making movies.
Mm-hmm. So I like the head lice chapter.
There are references, I guess acting references to Maya Rudolph, who does the foreword in her book, who is like some complete superstar as far as Alexi is concerned, and she actually happens to bump into her in the gym on a treadmill. She ends up being another mentor to Alexi.
Mm-hmm. And Alexi finds out that Maya Rudolph also grew up without a mom, so she feels very kind of close to her.
Aligned, yeah.
For those who dream, she gives us advice.
Yeah, towards the end, she gives us the whole sort of thing as, well, okay, so here we are. So if you're dreaming about big goals, here's a chapter for you. And talks you through a little bit of practical, I guess, converting your can't into maybe.
Yeah, so she says, figure out the resources you need to accomplish your goal. And share your goal with others. So those are kind of like two things. That's a recurring theme. I feel like every time you read about like big goals, the thing to do is to share them with the world, because it holds you accountable. I mean, you're not going to give up as easily because you've told everybody that, let's say, you're going to run a sub 3-hour marathon in the fall. So
have you done that? I'm keeping it quiet. I'm not letting anybody know that I'm going to try for a sub 3-hour marathon. Oh, except that we did a whole episode on it 2 weeks ago.
And we've told like every second author that we've had on the podcast.
Yeah, because it kind of makes it real. It makes it accountable. It puts it out there into the real world. It's not just some fictitious thing in your mind. It's a real thing in the real world.
Exactly. And she says that she got some advice from Shalane Flanagan, who is also a very good marathoner in the US.
She's now a female coach with Nike, I think, Shalane Flanagan.
She is, yes. So like Shalane tells her, whenever you're faced with sort of two options, then you need to ask yourself, do you need this to perform? So if you have choices to make,
choose the thing that takes you towards your dream, and do not choose the thing that takes you away from your dream.
Exactly. She also says, and I think this can apply to like everyday life, sometimes the best teammates are not necessarily your friends. And like, I feel like this can apply very much to work, because at work, sometimes you'll be in a very good team, a team that just works really well together, but they're not necessarily your friends, as in like you have coffee on the weekend and that kind of thing.
Sometimes they're just people who plug your blind spot.
Yeah.
You have a blind spot and they say something, you go, oh, yeah, they're right. But as people, you don't necessarily empathize with them in a holistic fashion, but they make you better because they cover the thing or they mention the thing, or they show the thing that maybe you wouldn't see yourself.
Yeah, so I guess surround yourself with people that are not like you. He also says trying your best is a habit, not a skill. I like that because it means that anybody can start trying their best. Like, they just have to work on developing the habit. It's not like you either have it or you don't. It's something you can work on.
And she talks about chasing dreams as being a privilege, and that, to begin with, maybe you need to suspend your disbelief. I mean, if you have a dream, it's a dream. So you're trying to do something that's not necessarily in your normal, realistic view. So you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit. So we have to believe we can run under sub 3 in order to have that as a dream. And she also says that sometimes people around you get uncomfortable because you're so committed, because it's kind of reminding them that maybe they should be a little bit more committed, maybe, and they don't like that. She says that often people around you can be very interested in things, but not necessarily committed.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've had partners in the past that were very interested in, that I wanted to be as good as I could be in running. But when it came to the day-to-day, it was just like, well, it's Saturday morning. Like, what do you mean you're getting up at 6 a.m.?
Yeah.
To go for a run.
Yeah. Do you really appreciate what I'm about?
Yeah. It's the day-to-day. But I guess that just means that, they're not the right people to surround yourself with.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, you have to make decisions. Well, you can only be good at a certain number of things.
Exactly.
You only have a certain amount of willpower.
Mm-hmm.
I guess at the end, Alexi takes us to, a sad moment with her father, where his father has died, and Alexi takes him to one side and kind of has a serious, almost parental talk with him about he needs to look after himself better. And he sees how proud that her father is, that she's now a fully grown woman who's now teaching him back the things that probably he taught her.
Yeah, I thought that was a cute way to end.
I guess Alexi has a lot of living still to do. She's still quite a young woman, even though she's made films and been to the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
She's into marathon running now, so maybe we'll see her rise in that.
And maybe she'll write a second book. I mean,
maybe we'll get Bravey too.
First one.
Yeah,
maybe
Bravey the sequel.
Mm-hmm. Because I'm sure she has, at the rate she's going, she's probably going to have lots of other life lessons to share with us.
I would guess, yeah. Do you want to kind of give your overview thoughts on the book? That's usually what we do towards the end.
Overall, I mean, like I love the book. It was super easy to read. I love the little poems in between the chapters.
Yeah,
I'll give some examples because some of them are super cute. Like there's this one, I admire pickles because there's no one moment that makes a pickle a pickle. It is a thing that happens over time. Pickles are patient. But it's sort of like referring to, people because you develop over time and you have to give yourself the time. The other one is if an oyster can turn sand into pearls, I can turn myself into anything.
it's nice.
Yeah, I like that. So she has all these little sayings in between the chapters, and some of them are just really good. I mean, they're just really insightful.
I was kind of in two minds with that in terms of going, is this good or is this a little bit contrived? I assume she wrote all of those things because it's not clear, but I assume she did.
I think she did because she talks about writing a lot of poems because she wanted to become good at writing poems. And so I kind of just figured that all those poems were hers because that was when she was practicing to write poems and she would write one every day. So I guess she picked the best ones.
For me, some of them spoke to me and some of them didn't. I think
Yeah.
that's what I would say. I tell you what I did like though, the cover of the book.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was beautiful. It's just a picture of her, but she's in kind of a strange. She's a little quirky character, I guess. So she's in a blue dress on a red background. So it's very, I guess, iconic. Very deep
With the
blue.
sports socks.
She has sports socks, but she has high heels, and she has like a blue tutu. But it's very iconic. It's you'd see it anywhere, and you go, "That's Bravey."
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't
Yeah.
go, "I wonder what book that is." You just see it at a glance and go, "That's Bravey by Alexi Pappas."
True.
We had an electronic copy, not a hardback, so I assumed there are no photographs in it. I didn't see any photographs.
I didn't see any photographs either. Yeah, in the electronic copy. I don't know though, because
It would have been fun to have some photographs, I think.
yeah, I don't think there are any in the book. If anybody's read it, they can let us know. But because usually the electronic copy will sort of have like a little
Usually it does, doesn't
they'll
it?
have an indicator saying that
Mm.
there's an insert here. I didn't really notice that, but there's a lot of things you can go see on YouTube with Alexi Pappas. I mean, her there's some trailers to her movies, so I saw a few of those. And she's also done some speaking. You can listen to some podcasts that did manage to get her on. She's actually very good.
Yeah, she's in the New York Times recently with an article. She's good friends with Mary Kane. They seem to hang out together in New York from time to time. And I thought the book was very readable, easy to read through, interesting stories, didn't dwell too much on lots and lots of detail, but gave you great insight to her upbringing and how she's analyzed it, sort of post-analyzed it. I mean, she didn't find out what had happened to her mum until she was quite a lot of years afterwards, quite older, but how she sort of pieced it all back together because she's gone through a certain amount of analysis, I guess. So she's pieced it back into her own mind and how it's making her stronger going forward, which is what you're looking for at the end of the day, but not what everybody gets. I guess it probably reminded me a little bit of Running Home in terms of the themes with going through a sort of depressive type period.
Yeah, and a lot of like about family and
I think Katie Arnold's book Running Home was much more literary in terms of the way it was written, the style, whereas Alexi's much more, she tries to extract the lessons and make them visible to you, and it's more cut into little pieces you can digest easily.
I think if you like Running Home, then you'll like Bravey.
Yeah, you will. It's a deep insight into a personality of a person who has one of their big blocks running.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. So should we do the outro?
I guess we should.
So thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. A big thanks to the publisher Random House for providing us with the review copies of the book. Unfortunately, we couldn't get Alexi on because she's very busy, but we thank them anyway for trying, because they really did try. If you'd like to leave us feedback on how we can improve the podcast or want to suggest a book that you'd like us to review in a future episode, you can leave us a comment on social media. So we are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter, we are reviews_running. You can also follow us on social media so that you can be notified when the next episode is released. And if you would like to send us an email, we are runningbookraeviews@gmail.com.
Till next time, bye for now.